And the crowd goes wild.
As always.
Well,
hey, Gary.
David.
Hey, and apparently there's a couple people watching. So welcome to our first edition of Shakedown stream, where we'll be going for at least the next few weeks. Hopefully not a lot longer, but as long as we're inside, we'll be doing this.
Right. In terms of the fun of it, we could be doing it forever. Since the point of this thing is to give a respite from not being able to go outside and go to shows and hang with your friends, we hope this is short-lived but very enjoyable. And anyway, I'm Gary Lambert. I host a little radio show called Tales from the Golden Road on the Grateful Dead channel on Sirius XM. And this gentleman here is, you have your little nameplate?
Yeah, I do have a nameplate. I took it from the Grateful Dead office.
That's David Lemire.
Yeah.
Now, I don't generally have a big sign with my name in giant letters behind me here at home because at this point in my life, I still remember my name, although it could become dicey any day now. That sign has a nice story behind it. When I did the Fare Thee Well broadcast from Soldier Field in Chicago, wonderful guy named Norm Ruth, fantastic graphic designer, did all the signage for the dressing rooms, for the production office, for everything backstage. And he was kind enough to make a sign for David Gans and for me to put up in our little tent outside Soldier Field. So that's just a little bit of extra set dressing for this week. And to let you know who the hell I am. People might not know who I am because I have my quarantine beard going. You know, it's a little terrifying. Especially for me, because I haven't grown a beard in a while, and it came in so much whiter than it did a few years ago. So,
touch of gray, man.
Indeed. Kind of suits me anyway.
Yeah.
But we are here to start this series, and we are starting it in style with a great vintage Grateful Dead show from the archives, selected by Mr. Lemieux. Just as he selects so much great music for the Dave's Pick series, for the box sets that have been coming out so beautifully. I got one right behind me there. Yeah, over there. That's the current one, current box set, June 1976. And it's fantastic. And what we have coming up for you is fantastic. We are going to be doing this for a few weeks. As we said, we've already got a bunch of shows picked out. We will be telling you about the shows. We hope to have some special guests down the line.
Do we have one? Do we have one this week?
Wouldn't that be a great surprise? Let's see if we have a special guest this week.
Check it out.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. It's Mickey, coming to you from my home and hoping you're comfortable and healthy in yours. One of the things we've all been missing most in these strange times is the magic that happens when we gather to celebrate our shared love of music. We're going to try to bring our community together by sharing some of our favorite shows. We call it Shakedown Stream. We've got a good one to start things off from a special time in the band's touring career. July 4th, 1989, Rich Stadium, Buffalo, New York. 89 was a great year for us. 2 summers earlier, something happened that no one ever saw coming, least of all us. The Grateful Dead had a hit record, imagine that. With both single and an album making it to the top 10. Videos on MTV, the whole works. Our popularity went through the roof. And we found ourselves playing in huge stadiums, but always trying to keep the essence of the Grateful Dead show. I think we succeeded on this day in Buffalo. The whole band was in great shape and high spirits. We achieved liftoff with the aid of great enthusiastic East Coast audience. Of course, the fact that we were playing on the 4th of July added an extra zing, as we always love celebrating our independence.
Well, thanks, Mickey.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
What a nice treat. Mickey coming to us from his home studio up in Sonoma County, California. By the way, I'm in New York City.
I'm Vancouver Island, British Columbia.
Poor guy.
Yeah.
I have my Rene Magritte tea mug here on both sides. You got some Rene Magritte.
Very nice.
Yes. And we are just going to really enjoy doing this. Mickey spoke of a couple of very, very important things. One thing being those great East Coast audiences, those great upstate New York audiences. And that's part of the reason for picking this show for tonight, isn't it, David?
It certainly is. And we know that, Gary, you're in New York. And we know that our friends in New York, the state, the city, have been hit very hard by what's going on. And grateful that I have a huge fan base there as well. And we wanted to do something that was from New York State. And the best show we have on video was from the New York State was this show. And we just figured this would be our kind of way to say stay strong. And as our tribute to everybody staying strong. And we're all, as they say, we're all in this together. So we wanted it to be a New York show, and we just felt this Buffalo show was the one to do.
Right. This one was officially released some years ago as Trucking Up to Buffalo. I always have to stop myself from saying Shuffle Off to Buffalo because I'm a fan of old movie musicals, but it's Trucking Up to Buffalo. And speaking of, before we get to describing the show, we want to mention that we're trying to help in other ways too. Our musical community has been hit in so many ways. First of all, we've lost some amazing people already to this plague. But we also know that musicians have been economically impacted in all sorts of ways, musicians and all kinds of music professionals. So part of what we're doing while we're here for these next few weeks is to urge you to support a great organization called Music Cares, which is associated with the Recording Academy and has done all kinds of work to help musicians who are facing economic or medical challenges. As you know, many musicians are uninsured or underinsured because they don't work for companies that provide insurance. They're mostly independent contractors. And musicians have been incredibly resourceful during this time in getting their music out to people. They're doing little shows from their living rooms. A lot of bands are showing music from their archives. If you have a favorite musician who is doing music from their living room and they have a virtual tip jar set up, please drop a little money in there to help them when they can't be out touring. All of the band's crews can't work. The people who work at all the great venues around the country are out of work for the time being. And Music Cares addresses all of that. They try to help people in the music industry who need the help. So we are happy to chip in that endeavor as well.
There should be a blue button somewhere. If you're logged into YouTube while you're watching this, there's a blue button somewhere. I don't know, maybe it's over there, maybe it's over on Gary's face. I don't know where it is, but there's a blue button. Just click it, and if you can, donate. If you can't, we totally understand.
Right, and also on YouTube, if you have a YouTube account and are logged in, you can also comment and chat as this goes on, as you watch the video unfold, and that'll provide some fun as well. Another thing I want to say is that I know it's hard times for everyone out there right now. You may have a medical challenge in your family. It may be happening to you. And it may be hard to ask people to reach into their pockets and donate when they may be in some pretty serious straits themselves. We're not asking to donate a lot. If a lot of people kick in a little, the effect can be enormous. I'm wearing my City Lights Books hat, by the way. City Lights Books, one of the most precious cultural resources on the planet. They were central to the Beat generation. They published Allen Ginsberg, got arrested for publishing Allen Ginsberg's Howl. Fantastic advocates of free speech and free thought. And they are in terrible danger of going under. They've been around for, I think, about 60 years or so, or more than that, closer to 70. They have a GoFundMe campaign going. And if there hadn't been a Beat generation, there wouldn't have been a Grateful Dead, because those guys were all tremendously affected by the works of Kerouac and Ginsberg. Of course, Neil Cassidy, the hero of On the Road, was the Grateful Dead's first hero and driver of the bus further. So there's a big connection there. Anyone you can help, any cultural institution that you can keep afloat at this point, independent merchants, independent bookstores, all of that, it's all part of the same community. And I urge you to help out in any way you can. So let's talk about this show in Buffalo. Let's talk about this period in Grateful Dead history with a maven like David Lemieux.
Well, this is a show that has, I attended this show with 45,000 of my friends. And I remember, as an 18-year-old who's, I will say, not that objective or critical about the Grateful Dead when I was 18, I even knew then that this was a special night. And we've talked about this, where the Grateful Dead had the ability by 1989 to turn this huge NFL football stadium into an intimate theater. And that was the sound by Healy and the lighting by Candace and the band's performance and the band's still ability to connect with the fans in such a big stadium. And this is a show that was on my radar. As soon as I started working for the Dead, I watched this in the vault with Dick. In the first few months I worked for the Grateful Dead, I worked with Dick for a few months, and we watched it, and I was really blown away. Dick was too, but he brought the tape home, the audio tape actually, brought it home, came back the next day raving about this version of Touch of Grey of all songs. And he loved the whole show, but he loved the version of Touch of Grey that opens up the second set, which I think is an appropriate song for, you know, what we're all going through right now. We Will Survive. And Dick's enthusiasm for it. And as you knew, Gary, Dick, when he was enthusiastic about something, it was amazing. He was really passionate about the things he was passionate about, very similar to Mickey. And I got to know the show very well during the production of it and the years leading up to it, because I'd wanted it to be released for years. And there's so many highlights. The first set opens with this great Bertha, and there's a great Cold Rain and Snow. There's an interesting little tidbit, Looks Like Rain in the first set. By this point, the Dead had stopped playing Looks Like Rain in the first set. I thought this was the penultimate version of it, but it's actually the last ever first set version of Looks Like Rain. Great deal. But the second set, stratospheric levels of highs, including the Morning Dew and the Not Fade Away, and just on and on. This is a really wonderful show. It's one of those ones that you can watch 20 or 50 or 100 times and never get tired of.
Yeah, and going back to what you were speaking to about how the Dead could make a stadium intimate, and Mickey in his remarks said, you know, we always tried to maintain the essence of a Grateful Dead show, even in the big stadiums. And I was so impressed with how much they succeeded, the extent to which they pulled that off, because the Grateful Dead did not play, you know, kill them with the backbeat rock and roll. Mm-hmm. They played music full of subtlety and weirdness and dissonance and nuance, and they could drop everything down to a whisper, and then they could rock the hell out of the place. And in the stadiums, they made no concessions to not being in a little club or a theater. They kept that essence, and as you said, aided and abetted by the quality of the sound, aided and abetted by Candace's beautiful lighting. And that on this tour, didn't they have those Jan Savka hangings?
They did.
Beautiful stage set by a wonderful artist. The aesthetics of Grateful Dead stadium shows were different than the aesthetics of just about any other stadium show you ever saw. And this is an excellent example of it. And one of the great bonuses, when they started playing larger spaces, first arenas, then stadiums, they started using video. Not to say we have to preserve this for posterity so much as to have something on video screens that the people in the farthest reaches of the venue could see. So you could see Jerry's fingers close up, or you could see the little glances exchanged by the players, and you know, all the things, all those little bits of wonderful business that made a show great. And they could transmit that through high quality video to the far seats. And Len Delamico, who was their primary video director for most of that era, did a wonderful job, had a really musical eye. You'd know, he would anticipate when changes in the music were coming. He would cut away, knowing there's going to be a guitar solo now, a keyboard solo now. And it's really edited, you know, mostly edited in camera for the live setting, of course. But then the Dead also had the foresight, years before there was streaming video, years before DVDs were even a viable technology, to preserve that stuff. And now we have it as a gift all these decades later.
Well, that's it. And we're very fortunate that somebody hit record. And as you say, Gary, these were shot not for 2020 viewing on YouTube or DVDs. These were shot for one reason. It was for the 45,000 people and the people in the upper reaches of the stadium to be able to see. And fortunately, they figured, well, if we're doing this anyway, let's just bring a recording machine and hit record. And luckily, it was a high-quality recording machine, a 1-inch video machine, which is at the time state-of-the-art professional, and it still looks amazing. This is wonderful footage. And it also happened to be a tour, this one in particular, where the Dead, you know, they knew they were playing well, so they were recording this tour right through the spring of 1990 to multi-track tape for what eventually became Without a Net, and then many other releases like Dozin' at the Nick, and then the Spring 90 box sets, etc. But what that has, and the Hampton shows and Nightfall of Diamonds, on and on. But what it's meant is that we've got this incredible archive of dozens and dozens of shows from a peak era of the Grateful Dead on multi-track tape. And what multi-track tape means is it can be mixed into a proper big live album, which this video was. We mixed it specifically for the DVD, both stereo and surround sound.
Well, I haven't seen it in some time, but of course I had trucking up to Buffalo when it came out, and happy to be revisiting it tonight. We have some questions. People submitted questions. A link was placed so people could send in their interesting, amusing, strange, mostly very nice questions. And we've picked out a few of them. I wish we had time for all of them. If we don't get to your question tonight, please submit again, or we'll keep these questions around. Maybe we'll get to them on one of our subsequent broadcasts. Maybe I'll go first because I have a Buffalo specific question. Gentleman who goes by the name Dooley Bottoms, and I don't even want to ask, says, many Hallmark shows come from Buffalo, Rochester, Ithaca. What made Western New York such a special staple on Dead tours? And it's a great question, and I think there's a few ways of answering it. First of all, we know the Northeast was an amazing stronghold for the Grateful Dead, starting pretty much from the jump. When they started touring, 1967 or thereabouts, they came to the East Coast a few times and had this tiny little cluster of very loyal fans. But starting in the early 70s, and especially when Sam Cutler took over, helping to plan their tours, Sam had this bright idea of working at certain areas where there was already a lot of fan interest and building it. And they hit the Northeast a lot. Of course, the Northeast had many colleges, and college gigs were ideal for a band like the Grateful Dead. So that's why you would get shows at places like Harper College, a famous show in Binghamton, New York in 1970, Clark University, Alfred College. They're just all Alfred University, rather. They're all over the place. You see these college dates. If you go through Deadbase, the list of Grateful Dead set lists, you'll see they played a lot of colleges, and then they had their regular places like Fillmore East and the Electric Factory in Philly, and then moving up to larger places in all those markets. Now, the distinction between playing Western New York and, say, playing New York City or Philly or Boston, I think the answer to that is this. A Madison Square Garden show or a Philly Spectrum show or a Boston Garden show was a certain kind of show, usually very high intensity, because the audiences were nuts in the best possible way. The mania for the music was so strong in those places, and they were major music markets, as they say. So the Dead felt a certain intensity from the crowd and paid back in kind always. When they got to somewhere a little off the beaten track in the Northeast, they still knew the fans would show up because that's what Deadheads do. But they also didn't feel like the stakes were as high, I think. Mm-hmm. There was a more relaxed feel, and the band could just go some places with the music. Not that they didn't in the big city shows. There were awesome ones. But I think there was a sense of just a more even vibe than you would get in the big cities. Bob Weir once expressed this to me with Rat Dog. They played a show in Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania, and they were playing Philly a few nights later. And the show they played in Stroudsburg was wonderful, but very oblique, very subtle. They didn't hit you over the head with the music. They went in some very jazzy directions, some strange, dissonant directions. And after the show, I told Bobby how much I liked it. And he said, yeah, well, it's the kind of show you can get away with in Stroudsburg on a Tuesday. But if you tried it in Philly on a Friday, they'd kill you.
Yeah.
So that's the answer I would give. That more relaxed vibe they had in those places like Buffalo and Rochester and Ithaca, may have had something to do with that.
Yep, I would agree. I looked through the list of releases that have come out by the Grateful Dead over the last 20, 25 years. And there are a few Madison Square Gardens and Philadelphia Spectrums, but certainly not proportionate to how many shows they played in those places. Whereas there are a lot of shows been released from Madison, Wisconsin, and Cedar Falls, Iowa, and Normal, Illinois, and DeKalb, Illinois, and places like that, as Gary says, maybe the pressure's just not on, so they can really step out and take those chances. And when the Dead take chances, this is to me something that I always love, is when they take those chances, and they succeed. There's nothing like it. I mean, that's to me what makes the Grateful Dead's magic is when they do succeed on those nights when they take the chances. And there are times when they did succeed a heck of a lot. So,
So have you got a question, David, from someone?
yes, I do. There's a couple questions came in about the Grateful Dead's video archive. And it was about how many shows were recorded of this quality, what we're about to see from Buffalo, that are in the vault. And I'd say there's about at least 50, certainly less than 100, probably in the kind of range of about 60 to 70 shows. And they're pretty much what you'd expect, which is to say most of the stadium shows from 1989 through 95. If you were seeing stadium shows then, you would generally see those screens. They'd be up, with the exception of some of the Vegas shows were not done. 91 wasn't filmed. But in addition to those, there are quite a few shoreline shows. Probably about 2/3 of the shoreline shows played from 1987 to 95 were videotaped. And this, when I say videotaped, I'm talking about multi-camera, something that looks good, broadcast quality. So I'd say probably in the range of about 65. The first thing I did working with the Dead was create this binder, just a book, and it is the Grateful Dead's video database. And I mean, I know the video collection quite well, but I will go through this book and I will do a count and find out how many for when we do this next week. But it's around that. So we have quite a bit. Speaking of quite a bit of unreleased material, we are going to be playing some unreleased Grateful Dead shows as part of Shakedown stream over the next few weeks. We're going to be putting some previously released, like the Grateful Dead movie, like what we have tonight. But do stay tuned every week, because we've got, in the next few weeks, we've got 2 exceptional unreleased shows from the vault that will be part of this series. So we've got a lot of stuff coming up.
Okay, well, now we have probably our least serious question, but a favorite. Didn't get a name of a user here, but has anyone ever accurately done a count of the most popular Grateful Dead related names given to dogs? I'm thinking Stella, but also met some Cassidys, Altheas, and even a Jack Straw.
Mm-hmm.
I'm turning to the professionals for an answer. I can't give you an answer. I'm going to just throw in the towel right there. We don't have exact data on that kind of thing. We only have anecdotal data. I know some of those names you mentioned came up. Phil Lesh had a Delia, I assume after Delia DeLion. So even the Grateful Dead band members got into the spirit of things. The quintessential person with whom I ever talked about this stuff was a guy named Brian Smith, who's no longer with us, sadly. He was a regular caller to Tales from the Golden Road. He was just known as Brian from South Carolina when he called us. And he was this classic stoner, good old boy guy. And he would tell us about his dogs every week. And I think he had somewhere from 14 to 20 dogs at any given time. And every time a new litter dropped, pretty much every dog got named after something in a Grateful Dead song. There was an Althea, and there was a Sugar Magnolia, and there was a Sugaree, and there was a Dire Wolf. And Brian would start telling a story, and David Gans and I could, just sit back for about 15 minutes and savor it, because this guy was really a trip, and he loved his Grateful Dead dogs. So I always think about Brian when I meet a Grateful Dead dog. He was the king of it. Anyway.
Oh, cool.
You got something?
Yes, I do. I've got a question asking me about having worked with the Dead now for over 20 years. Has my relationship to the music changed? In a lot of ways, yes, in that I've become a much more critical listener. But in terms of my enjoyment of the music and my, I'd say, never-ending passion for wanting to hear more of it, absolutely not. And I've been listening to the Dead pretty solidly for a little over 35 years, and 20 of it working with the band. No, and I've said this before, that even on my worst day at work, which frankly is, I mean, I love what I do. So a bad day doing what I do, generally what that would imply would be, we have a lot of deadlines, obviously. Sure. And it's making sure we meet those deadlines, which we do always, mostly. And in terms of as I say, a bad day, which really isn't that bad a day, I never don't want to hear the Grateful Dead. It's never like, well, I've heard enough of it today, or, that was a rough day at work. I'm not going to listen. It's quite the opposite, where on a bad day, which again, I have a tough time defining that. They don't really happen in my workplace. I work with great people, and I work with the band I love. But I do take solace in listening to the Grateful Dead, even when it's a rough day. That's kind of how I get my respite from anything that's kind of exhausting, is listening to more music. So no, I love the music as much, actually more than I ever have, and I keep growing. My love for it keeps growing. And I certainly, the one thing I could say is I have a much more critical ear in terms of saying, oh, maybe this doesn't represent the band's legacy so well, so I don't think we'll release that one. But otherwise, no, I love this music. I don't think that's changing anytime soon.
Yeah, I've got to say it's been a constant process of rediscovery for me, you know, revisiting favorite eras and being surprised by things from eras that I maybe hadn't paid as much attention to. And of course, we have the ongoing miracle of this music continuing in the hands of the people who created it, between Dead and Company and Phil doing his many, many things at Terrapin Crossroads and his occasional ventures back east to play the Capitol, all of that, plus the many musicians who are carrying on the music in new ways, in traditional ways, interpreting it, covering it very literally and faithfully, or taking it in very strange and wonderful new directions. This music seems like it's got a future.
Yeah, I think.
I've got let's see, one more question. Maybe we can get a couple more. This is an interesting one. Did anyone in the Dead ever consider or even ask Branford Marsalis to join as a full-time member? I would think probably not out of mutual desire, but out of just divergent careers. Branford, of course, already at that point, when he first played with the Grateful Dead at that memorable night at the Nassau Coliseum in 1990, was an established star in the jazz world with a busy touring career. And then a couple of years later, he was the music director on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno. So he had a day job as well as his musical gigs outside of that. So I don't think it would have been practical. I do know that it was a given that anytime Branford wanted to show up, he was welcome on the Grateful Dead stage. And he did a few times after that and has played with some of the spin-offs and offshoots as well. If I had to pick a favorite Grateful Dead collaborator, one of the people who on stage, you know, with the Grateful Dead just made the most magic, Branford would be way up there. And he's family, always will be. And speaking of family, ongoing condolences to the Marsalis family, the great Ellis Marsalis, patriarch of that amazing, amazing family, passed away from this disease that we are all dealing with right now. So thanks to him, he was a great musician, a great educator, and obviously he gave the world an ongoing gift, not just in his own music, but in the music his children will continue to make for us. So love to all the Marsalises. Let's see, we're getting down to it, aren't we?
So it seems, we get to watch some music finally, right?
Pretty soon, yeah, about a minute, 2 minutes to go. One very quick question. Kenneth Cohen asks, I'm new. What do I do? Kenneth, I have good news for you. You may be new to this, but I'm amazed to say that you are doing everything just exactly perfectly.
Yep.
You are on this, my friend. You've got this.
Yep.
I'll just say there are no rules to being a Deadhead or to enjoying this music. You just surrender to it. You are welcome in this community. It's the most welcoming community I know of, pretty much. So just have a hell of a time.
If you decide you're on the bus, you're on the bus. There's lots of room. So
that's right.
We're happy to have you and privileged to have you.
Okay, so this is just about it. We're coming down to the wire. We want to remind you, if you have the means to donate to Music Cares, please hit that blue donate button on your YouTube page. Continue to make comments and chat. Submit your questions for future broadcasts. And also, we want to let you know the Truckin' Up to Buffalo will be appearing on a different screen than the one you're seeing right now. Look below you. I think it's depending on how your screen is configured. It'll say link to Truckin' Up to Buffalo. You hit that link in less than a minute, and you will be getting some phenomenal Grateful Dead from 1989. David, this has been a blast. The half hour went by really quick.
It's been good. So it sounds like we get to do this again next week and the week after and the week after.
I think we have no choice, nor would we want to have a choice.
We signed up. It's good.
Let's go trucking up to Buffalo. Everybody be well, be safe, and enjoy this music that we all love so much.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.